team sheets dropped on Saturday when Tonali was on the bench and Willock and Longstaff started the game. I think there was a little bit of a debate, certainly a few comments coming my way on Twitter and social media, and I think really, if you look at the decision that Eddie Howe made, I think it probably did pay off. If you look at the fact they had those two really what you would call powder keg games, Chelsea at home in the Cup. You know, Newcastle really needed to win that one to keep the season alive. Then Arsenal in the Premier League hadn't won in 5. Newcastle, they needed to get it right. It was a brave call to put Tonali on the bench, but I think it completely paid off. I think Sean Longstaff deserved his start and he repaid that faith from the manager in himself. Joe Willock as well, fantastic game. That's 2 fantastic games in a week from Joe Willock now, and I think really, if Eddie Howe could have that, the competition for places he's got in midfield, if he could have that in every positional department, then, you know, Newcastle would be, you know, higher up the table than they currently are, that's for sure. But look, overall, tough decision, but one I think that was right. Keeps everybody now fresh for that game going into Nottingham Forest, and the whole narrative has changed at Newcastle. We've got to be honest, it was doom and gloom, 5 Premier League games without a win. Now Newcastle have stopped the rot and they go to Forest in much better mood than they would have without that win against Arsenal. Cup wins can paper over the cracks sometimes, and I think really Newcastle needed to back Chelsea up against Arsenal in the league with 3 points, and against the top side as well. Let's be totally honest. If anyone was complaining that Newcastle only beat Chelsea's second string in the Carabao Cup, they certainly couldn't complain against Arsenal. It was a massive result and a much needed one. So Newcastle off and running again in the Premier League. Hopefully they can go into the next international break on the back of another big result. But I think all said and done, the midfield decisions were exactly right in the last 2 matches.
Well, what a difference 2 wins make. 2 big wins, by the way, against Arsenal and Chelsea, getting through the quarterfinals, the Carabao Cup, and then beating Arsenal to show that Newcastle, the old Newcastle, does feel like they are back. Sean Longstaff, we spoke to after the game, he was there to tell journalists that perhaps we should be looking a little more closely at the patterns of play, because he feels that the old Newcastle has probably never gone away. So that's the view from the dressing room. Very interesting way of putting it, I have to be honest. And I think really Newcastle fans, they feel a lot better about life as well. I mean, that 2-1 defeat at Chelsea, while it wasn't the end of the world, it did feel very negative after that game. But those 2 wins, as I said, just lifted the weight of the world off the shoulders, certainly of Eddie Howe. And, you know, for Newcastle fans, it's, you go into that Nottingham Forest game now on Sunday, it suddenly doesn't feel as daunting. You're going to be up against Chris Wood, Elliot Anderson, Matt Sells, so it's almost like a reunion for the Newcastle old boys. But let's be totally honest, Newcastle will have the confidence again. That's the big thing. Nottingham Forest absolutely flying in the Premier League. You've got to tip your hat to them. But Newcastle have already been the City Ground this season. Won on penalties that night, got through in the Carabao Cup after a 1-1 draw. So this game is going to be interesting at the City Ground. Just going to have a quick look at some of the comments that I've been getting on the back of story done this morning about Sandro Tonali being told very gently by Eddie Howe that the reason he didn't play against Arsenal, a game I'm sure he would have been desperate to be involved in, because after all those months of being banned, you want to be involved in the big games, and Tonali is absolutely no different. The Italian press turned up for that game on Saturday. Gazzetta was in the crowd and they wanted to see how he was getting on, but you know, he was on the bench as we've mentioned earlier. But look, I think a lot of philosophical comments about Tonali. Just looking at some of the comments here on the Facebook page, Eric Ingleby saying Eddie Howe got it spot on. People also saying facts are facts. We lose less games with Longstaff in the team than any other player. And I think really, you know, other people saying it's a squad game. I think that's the general feeling that, you know, Eddie Howe got it right. And I suppose if you win the game against Arsenal, then you are going to get it right. So A lot was said about the selection, but I think, to be totally honest, Willock, Longstaff were absolutely fantastic. It was a real struggle to name a man of the match because so many players played well. In the past, I've had the complete opposite problem of that. It was so hard to decide, at one point, who was going to get the lowest mark. So this is a completely different scenario. Newcastle now flourishing again. Great to see. And another big talking point over the weekend was a player that wasn't involved, wasn't anywhere near St James's Park. Callum Wilson over in the Middle East in Qatar has been getting treatment, is at the end of his rehab, hoping to be back, telling people that he will be back for the game against West Ham after the international break. It's a Monday night game. It's a great game for him to come back to. But really, Callum Wilson, he's had a tough time, had a back problem. He's had some muscle injuries, and last season he suffered with a chest injury as well. So it hasn't been the greatest of 2024 for Callum Wilson. I mean, if you look at his goal record, it is absolutely second to none. Newcastle, the goal scoring charts, he's right up there. Only Shearer's ahead of him with Premier League goals. When he's fit, he plays. When he's fit, he does a job for the team. Hopefully he can come back in. I know there's been a lot of negativity around his injury absence, but I think the key thing to remember here is Newcastle have got James Bunce on board. He's meant to be an injury prevention guru behind the scenes. He wants to make sure that when Callum Wilson comes back, he's not going to be missing again for a sustained period of time. Let's hope that happens for him. I believe that when he's fit, he will get goals. Newcastle haven't had that sort of backup striker. Alexander Isak has been playing on his own, picked up injuries himself. The senior striker Newcastle need is already at the club, and that is Callum Wilson. So get him fit, he will definitely get you goals. So a few people commenting on his return, his potential return. He met some of the fans over in Doha at the weekend, told them he was going to be back. So hopefully when he does come back, he's going to go past that half-century mark. 48 goals for Newcastle in all competitions. Hopefully he can add to that tally. A couple more, he's on 50, and not many Newcastle strikers can say that. So let's hope he gets back. Let's be positive about it. He could be a big impact player for Newcastle in the second half of the season. So lots to be positive about now. Chelsea and Arsenal beating Newcastle in the last 8 of the Carabao Cup. Now they go to Nottingham Forest at the weekend. It's going to be tough, but as I say, Newcastle, the way they're playing, got every chance of getting something down there. So fingers crossed, another big win. Sign off for that last international break of the year. The Newcastle fans will be making a big day of it at the City Ground if they do. It's been kind to Newcastle in the last couple of years. Newcastle picking up 2 Premier League victories. They're also getting through the Carabao Cup, so let's hope that continues this weekend at the City Ground.